Hello everyone. Today let's look into Voiceflow variables and user state. This is one of the things that you should know because as you start building more and more complex chatbots, you will start relying on variable values to direct your conversation flow. And if you don't know how variables and states work, you might face some unexpected issues, and it might cause you a headache debugging and understanding why the things work the way they work. So for this example, for exploring this thing, I have a really simple chatbot. It basically prints out user's ID, then we have a choice. So if we click set var1, we will just set a value to this variable. And if we press go, we just go to this block free. Either way, no matter which button we press, we will go to block free. The difference is that in one case, the variable will be set to an actual value, and in the other case, we don't set the variable. Now, let's just look what it does. So if you press go, it outputs that the value is 0. Basically, this means that this variable was not set. Now, let's try again. If we go, now the value is set. Let's try again. Now the value is not set. And you should think, well, it works as expected. But there's a catch. So the catch is if we actually go into a chatbot that is published, so in my case, I'm using a setup which basically uses not a published version, but the so-called development version from the canvas. But if we look into it, so again, if we press go, it says 0. Let's start a new chat. So let's set a value. Value was set. Good. Let's start a new chat. And for the sake of the example, let's even refresh this page. So now if I would press go, I expect that the value should be 0. But why do we have the value that was previously set? And here comes into place the thing called user state. So as you have seen, in here we have a user ID, which was generated by the Voiceflow. And if we look at the Voiceflow API, it has some very useful endpoints where you can check what is the user state. And we can see that we have a variable var1 set to will this work. So this means that no matter how many times I will start the chat, I can like open a totally new browser window. As long as the chat is initiated with this user ID, the variable will have this value. So if you're building a very complex chatbots that rely on values that are set for the variables, you can end up in unexpected places where you kind of expect that the variable should not be set, but it is set because user did something previously and he still has the same user ID and so on and so on. And we can also do some interesting things with these Voiceflow APIs, like, for example, changing the variable values. So we can say, like, for this user, update this variable to testing. So let's send the variable was updated. We can check the state. It has new value. And if we go back to our chatbot and start a new chat and press go, we have this new value. Now, how can you make sure that this value will always be reset to empty value or a zero value? Well, there are one way to do it, and that works on assumption that a customer will either reload or close the browser tab between his interaction sessions. So in this case, we can change the chat persistence to forget after tab is closed or reloaded. And we can try it. And you will know that this works because, as you can see in here, we already have a totally new user ID. But if we check the previous user's ID, it still has the same state. And if we look at the state information for the newly generated user ID, like, it doesn't have anything set for the var1. It basically is a 0. And if we check it, we have set this new value, and we can see, okay, so the value is already set. We can start again. Press go. So the value is still there. But if we refresh the page, now we have a totally different user ID. If we press go, we have 0. So this is one of the things that you need to keep in mind, that you need to keep in mind how the user states work, and that no matter when you set the variable's value, it will be set in user's state. And even if a customer comes back days later, if you initiate the chat with the same user ID, that value will still be set in user's state. So in some cases, this might cause some unexpected issues depending on how you built your bot. Okay, so now I showed you that by updating settings regarding the chat persistence, we can force that each time a web page is reloaded or it's opened in new tab, a new user's ID will be generated, and the previous chat history and all the user state will be empty. Now, this works as long as you don't set your own user IDs while initiating a chat. So in here we have that same chatbot initialization script, but one thing that we will do, we will add this user ID, and let's say it will be U3. And now this functionality, which basically does says forget the chat and everything regarding it once the web page is reloaded or opened again, will stop working, because it works based on generating a totally new user ID once we refresh the page. And we can test that it will stop working by simply setting the value. And now we can test that, okay, so the value is set, it works. Now, if refreshing would empty the state, then it would mean that this should have been 0, but it's not the case. And so what you must know is that what this actually does, it just like not resets the actual state on the Voiceflow servers, but actually just generate a new user ID each time the browser is reloaded or you open a new tab and start the chat. So that's that. Now, the other interesting thing that you can do with variables is by using Voiceflow API, and in particular by using this update variable endpoint. So as you can see, like how hard-coded, let's say, our user ID, we can fetch the state, the current state for this user. We can see that the var1 is set. But now what I want to do, I want to add a new text output and say var2. So as we don't have this variable, the expected outcome should be that it will just output curly braces var2. So let's go. And we see that var1 we have as a variable, so it's defaulted to 0, and in here we don't have it, just outputted what we wrote in here. And we can also check in the variable list, we do not have this variable. But what you can do with this update variable API, you can say that for user u3, you will be updating some values, and those values will be var2, you will set it to testing. Okay, so we just set it. We can also fetch again the state. We all see that the variable exists in here. We can refresh even the Voiceflow and check the variable list. We still don't see the variable. But the interesting thing will be that if we press go, now it outputs the actual value. So this is one of the ways how you can dynamically create and set the variables. I'm not sure at this moment what could be the use case, but at least we have this possibility. So yeah, we can work with it. And I don't think it's documented anywhere. Also, what you can do, you basically can access any of this variable that is in the variables object from the user state. So You could even access this memory value. So this could be useful if, for example, you're using some kind of other language model that is not supported by Voiceflow, or you just want to take all the memory information, all the memory content, and send to some kind of third-party tool. But yeah, so these are the things that you need to know about the variables and the user states in Voiceflow for you to be able to work confidently and don't make some random mistakes that might cause you headaches while trying to figure out why the chatbot works the way it works. And see you next time.